Marcus had worked the whole rainforest for 7 years when he was sent to check a set of coordinates that should not have needed checking. A survey team had flagged something, a reading that suggested a void under a section of forest their map said was solid rock. They wanted a ranger to walk out and confirm the coordinates on foot. Routine. Marcus had done 100 jobs like it. The coordinates took him 3 miles off trail, north through terrain with no established route. He logged his position with dispatch and started walking. The first thing he noticed was the quiet. The Ho is one of the quietest places in the country. The moss swallows sound until the whole forest feels like a sealed room. Marcus knew that quiet. He had worked in it for 7 years. But this was different. This was not the quiet of a forest at rest. This was the quiet of a forest with nothing living in it. No birds, no movement in the understory, no insects, just his own boots on wet earth. He reached the coordinates 2 hours in, and there was nothing there. Just forest floor, salal, fallen cedar. Unremarkable. He checked his GPS. The device knew exactly where he was standing. The satellite signal was strong. His position marker sat clear and steady on the screen. But underneath the marker, where the map of the land should have been, there was nothing. A blank square. About 200 meters on each side. The contour lines of the surrounding terrain ran right up to the edge of it, and stopped, and picked up again on the far side, as if that square of ground was not there to be drawn. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. He pulled his paper map, the most recent government survey. Same blank square, the lines around it clean and continuous. Not the blank of a printing error, the blank of something that had been taken out. He walked the edge of it. 40 minutes to walk the perimeter. On the ground, there was no fence, no marker, no change in the trees. But his compass swung 15 degrees and held there. His radio, when he keyed it, made a sound he could only describe as receiving something that was not a transmission. And then he stepped inside the square. The forest in there looked identical. Same trees, same light. But Marcus said the ground did not feel like ground. Not soft, not loose, solid, but wrong in a way he could not point to, like a thin skin of soil laid over something that was not earth. His footsteps sounded shorter, flatter, like whatever was underneath him was not rock and root. At the center of the square he found a hole, perfectly circular, about 3 feet across, the edges too clean and too smooth to be natural, not torn the way an animal den is torn, but finished. At the bottom was water. Black. Still, it did not reflect the canopy above it. He dropped a stone in. He never heard it land. He stood at the edge of that circle for a while. Then the air changed. A sudden pressure drop, like a weather front arriving in seconds instead of hours. And every part of him that had spent 7 years in that forest told him to leave. So he left. He filed his report that night. Coordinates. The blank square. The circle. He went back 3 weeks later on his own time. With a GPS he bought himself in town. The square was still there. The circle was still there, but it had been filled. Fresh concrete, still damp to the touch, and there were tire tracks leading away through the trees, from a vehicle that did not match anything the park drove. Marcus left the service 6 months later. He has never gone back. Not because the place moved, because he does not believe he could find the way in again. Fresh concrete 3 weeks later, poured over a hole he couldn't hear the bottom of. Tire tracks from a vehicle the park didn't own. Here's the question I want you to actually think about. If you were Marcus, would you have gone back a second time to see who poured that concrete? Or is walking away the only sane choice and going back the thing that gets you erased too. I genuinely think reasonable people land on opposite sides of this. Tell me which one you are and why. Diana spent 8 years in law enforcement before she ever put on a Park Service uniform. County deputy, then criminal investigator. She built timelines for a living. She did not believe in things that could not be documented. She believed in evidence, chain of custody, and digging until something made sense. The campsite she was called to in October 2019 is the reason she no longer works in a national park. A hiker found it 3 miles south of Clingman's Dome and called it in. The tent was standing. The sleeping bag was laid out flat and open. The boots were set side by side at the foot of it. Not kicked off, placed. A water bottle stood upright on a rock outside. A book lay open, spine up, the page marked. Everything arranged the way a person arranges a camp when they are settling in for the night. The only thing missing was the person. No tracks leaving, no sign of a struggle. His wallet was in the tent. Kevin Morrow, 34, from Asheville. His car was at the Clingman's Dome lot. His last message to his girlfriend had come that morning. Heading in, back by dark. Diana ran the search herself. 3 days, grid teams, dogs, a helicopter, nothing. No body, no clothing, no trace that Kevin Morrow had ever left that campsite, except that he was gone. On the 3rd day, a K9 handler brought her something she could not file. His dog, 5 years old, 60 successful finds, a serious working animal, had been tracking a scent southwest from the camp. 900 meters. Steady. Then the dog stopped, sat down, refused to go forward. The handler tried to redirect her 3 times. 3 times she circled back and sat in the exact same spot. The handler told Diana the dog was not confused. She was refusing. Diana walked the line herself, and at the point where the dog stopped, she found nothing. No cliff, no water, no reason. But past it, the forest was subtly wrong. The trees older, the understory thinner, the light flatter, like the canopy overhead was heavier than it should be at that elevation. She kept walking. Half a mile past where the dog sat down, she found a building. It was not on any map. It was not in the park's asset database. No ranger she ever asked had seen it or heard of it. Concrete, single story, windowless, 20 by 30 feet. Decades old, the concrete weathered, the moss thick. 1 steel door on the north face. No handle on the outside. No lock. No markings. Nothing to say what it was or who had built it. The door was open. 2 inches ajar, she called out. Nothing. She pushed it with her flashlight. 1 room, concrete floor, concrete walls, empty, except for a metal table in the center. And on the table, 1 object. A Park Service radio, the same model clipped to her own belt. It was switched on, battery full, tuned to the park's emergency frequency, and it was receiving something. Not a voice, not static, but a slow, steady pulse. Rhythmic, like a heartbeat being broadcast on a loop. Diana keyed her own radio to call it in. Her transmission did not go through. Her radio made the same pulse. She photographed everything. She bagged the radio as evidence. She marked the building on her paper map and walked back to the command post. Her supervisor was waiting. He asked for everything. Her notes, her photographs, the evidence bag. She asked why. He said the case was being transferred. She asked to whom. He said that was not available to her. Diana had been a criminal investigator. She knew what an evidence transfer looked like. This was not one. The next morning, she was placed on administrative leave. Procedural irregularity. She resigned 3 weeks later. She told me she checked the case file later through a friend's login. The search report listed one location searched: the campsite. No dog, no structure, no radio. The building she stood inside did not exist in any record she could reach. A dog with 60 fines refused to cross a line in the forest. Diana crossed it and found a windowless concrete building with a radio broadcasting a heartbeat. So here is what I want your honest read on. Who understood the situation better that day? The trained investigator who walked toward the building, or the dog that sat down and refused to take another step? One of them followed the evidence. One of them followed instinct. I think the answer to that says a lot about what you do in the woods. Tell me which one you trust. The third account is not from a ranger. It is from the man who drew the maps rangers use. A government cartographer with 34 years of experience, who was handed a routine assignment and found that 12 square miles of terrain had quietly gone missing from the record. That is next. James spent 34 years making maps for the government. He was not a ranger. He was the man who drew the lines the rangers walked. And in 2018, he was handed a job he was told would be routine: updating the elevation data for a stretch of the Sangre de Cristo range in southern Colorado. What he found is the reason he spent his last 5 years on the job not trusting a single data set in front of him. The work itself was simple. New laser scans of the terrain laid over the old elevation model, flagging anything that did not match. Most mismatches are nothing: erosion, tree growth, the small drift of an old survey. What James found in one quadrant was not a mismatch. It was an absence. The new scan showed a basin, roughly oval, steep walls, a floor about 400 feet below the land around it, 12 square miles of it. The old elevation model, the one that had sat in the database for decades, showed none of that. It showed smooth, continuous mountainside, perfectly ordinary slope where the new scan showed a deep, sealed basin that had no business being there. James assumed the old data was broken, so he pulled the original survey, the ground measurements, the aerial photos, the handwritten field notes from the men who walked that terrain in the 60s. The original records showed the basin. It was there in 1963. It had been measured, documented, drawn. Somewhere in the 30 years between that survey and the digital model everyone now used, someone had taken 12 square miles of terrain out of the record. Not corrected it, not updated it, removed it. He filed a query asking when that section had last been edited and by whom. The log came back blank. Not missing, blank. The field that should have held a date and a name had never been filled. The only entry was a last modified stamp and an editor listed as System. James had worked there 34 years. There was no user called System. He pushed it up the chain. A senior administrator he had never spoken to told him the quadrant was flagged for review and he should move on to the next section. He did not move on. He drove to the coordinates. The basin was exactly where the new scan said it was. It was not a sinkhole. It was not a collapsed cave. The walls were too regular, not machined, but too even to feel fully natural. The floor was flat, and there was a world down there. Full-grown trees, a small lake, what looked like open meadow. A landscape dropped into the mountain and sealed off from everything around it. He photographed it. He recorded the coordinates. He did not climb down. When he got back to Denver, his access to the elevation database was gone. His query history was cleared. The new scan of that quadrant had been swapped for the smooth version, the one with no basin, nothing there. James retired in 2023. He told me the maps are not missing pieces because they are old. He said the pieces are missing because someone with the authority to change the record decided those pieces would not be on it. And then he said the thing I have not been able to shake. He said, "Whatever is in that basin, it was easier for someone to erase 12 square miles of a mountain range than to explain it. A basin measured in 1963, gone from every modern map, still sitting there in the mountains with a lake and a meadow at the bottom of it." Here's the real question under all three of these. James believes someone removed it on purpose, but maps get corrupted, files get lost, and people see patterns in accidents all the time. So, which is scarier to you? That a person with authority deliberately erased 12 square miles of a mountain, or that these things fall out of the official record entirely by accident, and nobody is watching the map at all? Pick one. I don't think there's a comfortable answer. 3 people. 3 blank spots on the map. 3 accounts that end the same way, with the person who found the thing no longer able to point to where it was. What connects them is not what they found. It is what happened to the record afterward. A report that read differently the next time it was opened. A search file that listed the campsite and nothing past it. An elevation model that showed smooth mountainside where a basin had been measured 60 years earlier. Whatever you believe about who or what is behind that, there is one practical lesson in all 3 accounts, and it is worth taking seriously if you spend time in the backcountry. If you ever find something out there that does not belong to any explanation you have, a structure, a coordinate that reads wrong, a place that feels off in a way you cannot name, document it on a device that is not issued to you. Your own phone, your own camera. Save it somewhere that is not connected to any system that could quietly change it later. Because the common thread in every one of these accounts is not that someone was attacked. It is that the record did not hold what was put into it. The record is the thing that got altered. Not the people. The record. To the ranger who dropped a stone into a hole and never heard it land. To the investigator who trusted the evidence right up until a dog refused to cross a line she couldn't see. And to the mapmaker who found 12 square miles of a mountain range that someone decided we were not allowed to see. Thank you for trusting Obscure Nights with these accounts. If you have an encounter of your own, our submission email is in the channel bio. We read every single one. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok. Links in the channel bio. This is Obscure Nights, where the cases nobody talks about get told the way they actually happened. Good night.